on now to the 20th chapter of the book of Genesis, so that we take just a very quick look here to see something that has become a pattern where we saw in earlier chapters with Abraham, where he begins to come into a land. On a previous place, he went into Egypt because there was a famine. Now we see him going into the land of a place called Gerar. Look at verse number 1. Abraham journeyed from thence towards the south country and dwelled in Kadesh and Shur and sojourned in Gerar. So let's understand then, first of all, as we look at this chapter 20, that he is now being referred to as God changed his name in chapter number 17. And he's now being referred to as Abraham, no longer Abram. And also verse 2, and Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, you see, she's being referred to now as Sarah instead of Sarai. And he says, Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, she is my sister, and Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. So this was the scheme that they hatched before, that because of Sarah's attractiveness, that when they would go into a land that they did not consider friendly, that they would say that she is his sister, lest Abraham be executed, and they take her as the prize. Well, it's something to be said there, because now you know that Sarah is 80 something years old, 89 years old, maybe 90 years old here, and yet there is something so attractive about her that the king in this land, Abimelech, takes her in when he finds out that she is not married, or he assumes she's not married because he's told by Abraham that she's his sister. And look at verse number 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. And Abimelech begins to talk to God in his dream. And but Abimelech had verse 4, but Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay a righteous nation? So this issue about him taking Sarah in his harem, if you will, put the whole nation at threat. And Abimelech understood that. He said, will you slay also a righteous nation? Then verse 4, said he unto me, she is my sister. In other words, he said, that's what he told me. The man told me she's my sister. And she herself, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this, the king says. And God said unto him in a dream, yeah, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of the heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Now, notice that God says, I withheld you from sinning against me. In other words, whatever he would have been involved with Sarah would have been sinning against God, even though Sarah and Abraham misled her. And God says at verse 6 again, therefore I suffered I thee not to touch her. Now, therefore, restore the man. This is the reason I'm dealing with this chapter 20 here, for us to see some first mentions here. Here it says, therefore, restore the man his wife. And this is the first place that this next statement is made, for he is a prophet. That's the first mention of a prophet in the Bible. Restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet. And there's really a picture here of the wife symbolizing, if you will, the bride of Christ, symbolizing the church, if you will, that would be in the New Testament. And something about the protection of the bride is so important to God that he brings judgment on Gerar, even though the king Abimelech had not put his hands upon her, even though he had done it innocently. And so listen to this verse number 7. He says, for now restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee that thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. And so here we see prayer and prophetic being mentioned together. The first mention of a prophet is in the context of praying for someone to be delivered. And the prophetic must never be separated from prayer. The prophetic must never be separated from kingdom. You notice the first mention of the prophet has to do with a kingdom. It has to do with prayer. It has to do with It has to do with the bride. It has to do with breaking a curse. These are all things that are critical to the prophetic. Kingdoms, nations are the bedrock of the prophetic. Not some little word of knowledge here and there. That's okay. But when you start talking about someone that's a prophet, the first mention of a prophet is one that has to speak to a king that will impact an entire nation. And we'll see that in just a moment. I want us to see this verse. It says, if thou restore her, let's look at verse 7 again, and we'll run through this chapter. Now, therefore, restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. So God says that this prophet does not pray for you, you're not going to live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou, and watch this, all that are thine. So Abimelech had it right. God says, I'm getting ready to wipe out you and everybody that is a part of you over this situation. Can you imagine that? And what would restore or save this situation is a praying prophet. Look at verse 28. Therefore Abimelech rose up early in the morning, called all his servants, and told all the things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. They were afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, why did you do this? And well, what have I done to offend you, that thou brought this on my kingdom a great sin? Now I'm looking at verse, I'm reading fast, but I want you to look at that verse 9 where it says that thou hast brought on me and my kingdom a great sin. So there is the prophetic deals with kingdoms. So you brought on me and my kingdom a great sin. Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. This is Abimelech talking to Abraham. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? What would cause you to do this? Abraham says in verse 11, because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. So he said, this is why I did it. And God has been teaching Abraham to trust the Lord. But here Abraham is trusting in his flesh by saying, I've got to run some scheme in order to be protected from the notion that these people do not trust or believe in God the way that I do. And then he goes on to buttress it in verse 12, say, yeah, and indeed she's my sister. She's the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. But all that being said, that still does not justify what Abraham did. But he did it out of fear, and he did it out of the flesh rather than trust God. And even though he's a man of faith, and we've already gone over the chapter where the Bible says that Abraham believed God, it was counted unto him for righteousness, or imputed unto him for righteousness. But here we see one of the failings of Abraham. But yet, even in that failing, God does not remove the reality that he is a prophet that can pray and bring release to the nation. He is a prophet that can pray and that can change the curse, that can break the curse that is on the nation. And look at verse 13. And it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said unto her, this is thy kindness, which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, he is my brother. So they have this pact that they made. Look at verse 14. And Abimelech took sheep, oxen, men servant, women servant, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah, his wife. So he makes penance unto him. He restores her. He gives an offering unto him, and all of these kinds of things, even though it was not directly Abimelech's fault. And in verse 15, Abimelech said, behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it please you. Live, go where you want to go on my land. And look at verse 16. And unto Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee and with all others. Thus she was reproved. All right. Verse 17. So Abraham prayed, and this is the part I was trying to get to. Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech. So watch what the situation was now. He prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children, meaning that because of this, all of their wombs had been shut up. There was a curse that was released whereby the women could not bear children. And then verse 18, for the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And uh, that's an important chapter, although in some surveys they don't even touch on that chapter very much because of the it seems like something that's just out of the way a little bit. It's like it's dropped in there that only deals with one segment. But I thought it was important because that's the first place that you have the mention, the mentioning of the prophetic, and indeed the first place that you have the mentioning of praying or interceding for someone. Although, of course, Abraham intercedes for Lot, but the words intercession and prayer is not really used there. It simply is him speaking up and saying, "Will you destroy the land if there are 10 righteous people?" All right, and moving on to chapter number 21 here in the Word of God. This chapter deals with Sarah and deals with what happens regarding the conception of Isaac. Notice here in verse chapter 21, the Lord visited Sarah, and as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken, for Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age at the set time which God had spoken. Remember there in chapter number 18. And Abraham called the name of the son that was born unto Sarah, that Sarah bare, he called him Isaac. And so now we see the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac is now on the scene. And Abraham, following instructions, verse 4, circumcised Isaac on the 8th day, and as God had commanded him. And Abraham was, this is the picture that we get to see, going to become important in another chapter in just a moment. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. That means that Sarah was 90 years old. Look at verse 6. And Sarah said, God have made me laugh so that all that hear will laugh with me. Now she laughed. We remember back there, she laughed in chapter 18. Abraham laughed in chapter 17. Now here in this chapter number 21, we see that she said, God has made me laugh and others will laugh with me. Verse 7 in this chapter 21, she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck, for I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And listen to this just beautiful language. They finally have the son that God spoke of many, many years ago when Abraham was 75 years old. It was 25 years in the making. Look now at the 10th verse. Wherefore said she unto Abraham, cast out, or look at verse 9, because this is the Ishmaelite situation is going to come up here. And Sarah said and Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even Isaac. So now the choice that she made, the situation with Abraham going in unto Hagar and Hagar having Ishmael, now Sarah has a big old problem because of some mockery that's taken place. And she tells Abraham to cast out the bondswoman, get rid of her. Verse 13, and also the son of the bondswoman will I make a great nation. Look at verse 12. And God said to Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondswoman. In all that Sarah has said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. God said, yes, Isaac is the chosen son. But then he goes on to tell him in verse 13, and also the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation because he is thy seed. Verse 14 begins to deal with the fact that God comes to visit her in a destitute situation that we don't have time to deal with. But God deals with her as she gets to a place of a well, and the Lord begins to speak to her and begins to take care of her. Look at verse 23. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not falsely deal with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, um, and to the land wherein thou sojourn. And Abraham, Abraham said, I swear. Now, this is in dealing with Abimelech. Look at, as we look back up just a little bit, verse 20, and God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer, talking about Ishmael. And he dwelled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So he married an Egyptian, and it came to pass at that time that Abimelech, the prince, the chief captain of the host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. And then the swearing ceremony that we looked at here. All right. As you look at that chapter number 21, you're going to see Abraham dwelling in various places, Abraham being involved in the digging of wells. Look at verse 30. It says, and he said, for these 7 lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called the place Beersheba, because there they swear, both of them. And you'll find later on that these wells that had been dug by Abraham were covered over and filled with sand by the enemies. And Isaac, in a later time, comes and opens up those wells that had been dug by his father. The Bible says further in 33, verse 33, Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. So we know that Abraham, there was a land that God called him in, was the land of Israel, and that there would be times that he would go into other lands, sometimes because of famine, and sometimes for other reasons. He would be in various other places, and this is one of those occasions where that occurred. Let's go on to chapter. Let's go on to chapter number 22, as we're approaching the end of the Abrahamic teaching regarding the chapters 12 through 25. His chapters are longer than any of the others. In this chapter 20, we see it. It came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here am I. This is the situation where God begins to speak to Abraham in this particular chapter 22, and says to him that I want you to go and sacrifice Isaac. And he began to speak to him and tell him to go to Mount Moriah, saddle the donkey, and go up to Mount Moriah and sacrifice Isaac. Now, this man has been waiting for many years for his son to be born. And now this is not a newborn baby, but Isaac is a young fella, probably 13, 14 years old. And God tells him to go and place Isaac on the altar and sacrifice him. And Abraham, we see a display of his faith, wherein he is simply trusting God. And he goes on a 3-day journey to a place called Mount Moriah. Look at verse number 4. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. So Abraham has this concept in his mind that he's going forward to worship. Now, God has told him to sacrifice his son, but in Abraham's mind, whatever God has directed him to do by way of worship, that's what he is willing to do. This shows an extreme act of trust that he has in God, because he'd been waiting all of these years to have a son at 100 years old, and now at about 114, God is saying, sacrifice him. And in verse 6, it says, Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac, his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, my father. And he said, here am I, my son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood, But where is the lamb for the offering, for the burnt offering? So by now, Isaac knows something about worship as a young man. He says, wait a minute, there's supposed to be a lamb that we're sacrificing as a burnt offering here. And listen to what Abraham says, which is a display of his faith. Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for burnt offering. So they went, both of them, and they came to the place which God told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. In verse 10, and Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. So he's walking through this, trusting God all along the way. And look at verse 11, powerful verse here. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And verse 12, and he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that God has not that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son. Obviously, this is a picture of the day that Jesus will come and would be literally sacrificed. But this is a demonstration of Abraham not being willing to withhold his son from offering up unto God. This is the ultimate sacrifice. And look at verse 13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him, a ram caught in the thicket by the horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. So just as he said, the Lord will provide, the Lord did provide a sacrifice. And I want us to understand something here, that you read that verse number you read that verse number 12, it says that, for now I know that thou fearest God. So there is a sense here in which the angel of the Lord conveys the heart of God that says, now you have demonstrated your reverence for me. You have caused me to know something that I did not know before. God knows everything, but God has not experienced everything. So by the act of offering the ultimate worship to God, caused there to be a divine experience that God says, now I know, because there was an experience that God has. This is why our worship is so important before God, because God knows us and everything about us. But our worship before God causes God to experience us and to experience our worship. And that's one of the reasons why worship is so critically important. Look at verse 14, where we get one of our key words that we use in worship now. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, meaning the Lord who provides. Jehovah Jireh. It said unto this day, the mount of the Lord, it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time and said, by myself have I sworn, said the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing and have not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing, this is where we begin to see this now, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thee. Thy seed shall be as the stars of the heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemies. Now, it would take a lot to unpack there, but you see that when Abraham was willing to give up the most treasured thing, then God says that I'm going to give you authority over your enemies. I'm going to cause you to deal. I'm going to cause in blessing for you to be blessed, and multiplying for you to be multiplied. I'll cause your seed to be as the sands of the seashore, etc. Look at verse 18. And in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Very critical reading here in this chapter 22 and verse 18. Because thou hast obeyed my voice. That critical verse there. And all thy seed shall, in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And Abraham returned unto his young men, and they arose up and went towards Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. Then it gets into the listing of various names, some genealogy there. Let's move on to chapter number 23 as we move forward in the life of Abraham. And let's understand some things here. All right. Here, this chapter begins to talk about the passing of Sarah. And notice here in verse 1, it says, and Sarah was 127 years old. There were These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjatharba. Probably not pronouncing that right, but you see where she died. The same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. So she died in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. But let's look at she's 127 years old. She gave birth to Isaac at the age of 90. She's 127. So that means that when she dies, Isaac is 37 years old. 37 years old. Now that becomes important because we understand that Isaac doesn't get married into a later point in his life, 40 years old, and he doesn't have any children until he's 60 years old. So the Bible says here, and Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead with you. And then you see here in verse number 6 where they provide a sepulcher, a place of burial for Sarah, and Abraham buries Sarah in that place. And that's about as much we need to cover in that chapter. Just looking down at verse 19. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Mesphilah, before Myri, the same in Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And so we see the eulogizing and the burying of Sarah at the age of 127 in chapter number 23. Now, chapter number 24, then, because Abraham's journey goes on through chapter number 25, and we're almost at the end of that journey now. Now we see in verse 24 where Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant that ruled over all that he had, put thy hand on my thigh. I want you to make a promise to me that you will go and get a wife for my son Isaac from among my kindred. And this is where the direction is given to the chief servant of the house of Abraham, and he sends his servant Eliezer to go and to get a wife for his son Isaac. And the story displays the reality that Eliezer takes some time to pray about this, takes some time to plan around this. He makes a covenant with Abraham regarding not getting a wife for Isaac from among those that are dwelling in the land that he is in, but to go to his father's house in the land of Mesopotamia, in the city of Nahor, to get a wife for his for Isaac. And it's a lot to read in the chapter, so we're not really going into this chapter. But this whole chapter is really about dealing with going and getting Sarah, the exchange of jewel and money and so on and so forth, about going to get a wife for Isaac. And the wife that is obtained is named Rebekah. Look at verse 58. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, wilt thou go with this man? And she said, I will go. And he brings Rebekah back from the land of Abraham's nativity, and there is where the Lord allows him to find favor and to connect with Rebekah. And the Bible says in verse 61, Rebekah arose and her damsel, and they rode upon the camel and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. And look at verse 62. And Isaac came from the way of the well of Lahario, for he dwelled in the south country. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at evening time, And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. Because when Eliezer went away, he took 10 camels with him. And he noticed now that the camels are coming back. And verse 64, and Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off of the camel. Seems like she's a little bit aggressive there. Huh. She got off the camel. Uh, for she had said unto the servant, what man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant said, he is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered her face, covered her face a bit, put a veil over her face. And the servant told Isaac all things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted from his mother's death. So this is at the time that Isaac is 40 years old. His mother had died at 127, so he was 37 years old. So 3 years later, Isaac is joined with his wife, and part of the objective of Abraham, even in his elderly age, was to make sure that he made provisions for that Isaac would have an accurate wife. Now, some of the story of their lives would kind of suggest something less than complete accuracy here, but at the same time, it would. At the same time, there was some accuracy here. All right, so let's move on now to chapter number 26, which begins to tell a story that a lot of people miss or don't get into. Now, we know that Abraham wife was Sarah, his half sister. We know that he married Hagar and had a son, Ishmael, by Hagar, son Isaac by Sarah. But now we see where he also had 6 other sons by Keturah. And of course, Keturah is a person like all of the rest of them here, a person of color, but this is truly an African. Look at it, verse 1. Then Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. Now, you just read in chapter 24 that Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and now it seems like he has a new leash on life. Isaac has gotten his wife, and Abraham is on about his business. And so he took a wife, Keturah, and by the way, we know that if at the point that Sarah died, she was 127. We know that at the time that she died, that Abraham was 137 because they were 100 years apart. And we know that Abraham's life expanse, that he lived a total of 175 years. So that he has, God extended his time, even as he promised in other places that he would live to a ripe old age. All right, let's look now. In this chapter, it says, then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. And of course, there are a number of things that can be talked about here, but we see the Midians, and the Midian is the father of the Midianites, and we know that there is going to come a time in the book of Exodus where when Moses leaves out of Egypt, he flees into a place called Midian, and he meets Jethro there, the priest of the Midianites. So that we know that the Midianites are offsprings of Abraham as well as these others that are here, Medan and Jokshan and Zimran. All of these are Abraham's seed by Keturah. And we know that God said that he was going to bless all of Abraham's seed. So while Abraham has the 2 sons that are talked about so frequently, Isaac is the son of promise, and there's Ishmael. God said, make a great nation of him. But then he has 6 other sons. So there are a total of 8 sons that Abraham has. And watch what Abraham does, because this last chapter we deal with about Abraham, deals with his legacy, deals with how he divides up and divvies up the various resources because God had made him rich. So in verse 5, we see, and Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. He gave all that he had unto Isaac. So Isaac is the heir of all that he has. But there are resources that he carved out for the others. Now listen to verse 6. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. So that he made sure that he made provisions for all of his sons. All right, look at verse 7. And these are the days of Abraham's life which he lived, 100 Like I told you, 175 years. There it is, right in the Bible. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And this is where the story of Isaac really begins to pick up, and we're going to get into it right now. And the sons of Isaac, the sons Isaac and Ishmael were buried, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Mishpalah in the field of Ephron, the sons of Zohar and the Hittite, which is before Myri, and the field which was purchased of the sons of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. So the plot of land that he bought was the same place where Abraham was buried, that we looked at that a little bit earlier. Then there is a setting forth of a genealogy, the generations of Ishmael, so on and so forth, the genealogical table. In that regard, there's some things that could be said about that, but we won't deal with that. And then let's pick up now. These are the generations of Isaac, verse number 19, because now we're talking about the second patriarch, and that is the patriarch by the name of Isaac, the son of promise. And we know that his story begins to pick up at verse 19, and it goes through chapter 26. Even though his life will expand to other places, but it covers a much shorter period than what Abraham period covered. Isaac's period covers chapter 25, verse 19 through chapter 26, verse 35. Let's do it tonight. So looking at verse 19, it said, these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, his wife. So again, this is where we get the 40 years old. He was 40 years old when he took her to be his wife. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife. And we find something out here in verse 21. I'm in 21 now. We find out that, and if you look at verse 20, you'll see that he had gone back to to Abraham's native land, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Pandarammon, and the sister of Laban, the Syrian. So that's a lot. We'll pick up some of that as we go forward. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. Verse 21. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said, 2 nations are in your womb. So God had already talked about Abraham, a father of many nations, and now his son Isaac, the only children that he will give birth to are 2 nations that are in the womb, and the 2 nations are in the womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and one people will be stronger than the other. The elders shall serve the younger. This is all divine direction, instruction that is given to Sarah. So she already has information that the younger is going to be ruler over the older. But God's going to do this thing. But Sarah will see, Rebecca will see, had a tendency to try to orchestrate things herself, and it caused great problems. Verse 24, and when her days were to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. Esau, that's the firstborn. And then after him comes, and after that came his brother out, and his name was called. He took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So they had been married for 20 years, because at 40 years old, she became his wife. And for 20 years, she was barren. And at 60 years old is when Isaac had his first children. Well, he's ahead of his father, because when his father had his first child, he was 86 years old. But he's 60 years old because Sarah was barren and not able to give birth to children. But thank God that his intrigue of God caused there to be a birth that took place. And he's 60 years old at the time this take place. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man and dwelled in tents. So you see, Jacob manner is more household, and Esau manner is more in the field. And the Bible, verse 28, Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And what we see here is not a hatred for the other child, but we see that Isaac preferred Esau and Rebekah preferred Jacob. And because of that preference, it would ultimately cause significant issues of deception within the home. And parents have to be careful to note that while you may favor one over the other, while you may see something in one that you don't particularly see in the other, it's very important that you not allow that to become a tool of manipulation. Let's read on a little bit further here to see some things here. It says, and um, verse 29, and Jacob sawed pottage or made pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. Esau been out in the field, Jacob in the house. Jacob made some food. Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with the same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore, his name was called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. What you have, it is expectation as your birthright position. You are the elders. He says, sell me your birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point of to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. And then Jacob said, then gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he took and did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. He gave it away for basically nothing, which is one of the reasons why you begin to understand why God would prefer Jacob over Esau. Well, Jacob is a supplanter, he's a trickster. But one of the reasons for God's preference is that Esau was unwilling to protect that which was of great value. He was willing to give up something of great value for something that was not significant. Um, People who don't know how to protect the anointing and the grace that's on their life are dangerous people. And here Esau gives up his birthright, his birth positioning, if you will, for a bowl of food. All right. Now there's something wrong with Jacob here too, because his name means trickster, supplanter. And there again, he supplanted his brother. Now look at chapter 26, because chapter 26 deals with a situation where uh, Isaac is now in the land of Gerar, and he makes the same kind of decisional choice that his father made to hide the nature of his wife from the people of Gerar and to play as if she was his sister. Let's get into it real quick. And there was a famine in the land because beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. So this is a famine in the days of Isaac now. And he went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and I will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I made, which I swear unto your father Abraham. That's verse number 3. And I will make of thee I'll make of thy seed to multiply the stars of the heaven, and I will give unto thee all these countries, and in thy seed shall all nations of the world be blessed. That's a word that God gave to Abraham. Now he's speaking to Isaac. And verse 5, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And verse 6, and Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he says, she is my sister. For he feared to say, she was my wife, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah because she was fair to look upon. She was easy on the eyes. All right. Verse 8, and it came to pass when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife. They were hugging, kissing, playing together. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is thy wife. How saidest thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, because I said, lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, what is it? What is this that thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have leaned with thy wife, or had relationship with her, and thou should have brought guiltiness upon us. You could have brought a curse on us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And then here is a powerful verse here. The Bible says that Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forth and grew until he became very great. And we read further, verse 19, Isaac servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. And you begin to go through this in verse 18. Let's look back up. It says, Isaac dug again the wells of water, which they had dug in the days of Abraham, his father. For the Philistines have stopped them after the death of Abraham, and he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. So remember, we looked earlier today where Abraham dug wells, but when he died, the enemies had put sand in them and stopped the wells up, and we see Isaac redigging the wells that his father had dug. All right, and all right, so that much for chapter number 26. In chapter number 27, we're going to close here. This chapter deals with the fallout that relates to Isaac, that relates to Jacob and Esau, and it deals with the story of how that Rebekah brought Isaac to a place, or brought Jacob to a place to deceive his father, to receive the blessing that was to go upon the life of Esau, but she orchestrated a strategy to have Jacob to play as if he was Esau, and to get Esau's blessing from the father. Now, the critical thing to understand about this is that Jacob was old by this time. He was stricken in age. Well, you have a child that's 60 years old. By the time these are not little boys now. They're grown in the full age. And Jacob is at least 100 years old now, and he has suffered blindness. And as a result of that, he could not see who he was dealing with. He thought it might be Jacob, but it felt like Esau. And therefore he blessed Jacob, intending to bless Esau. And when Esau came in to get the blessing, he was untimely. He was too late. His father had already given the blessing to Jacob. Jacob had deceived his father into giving him the blessing. And this caused there to be a rift in the family, so much so until Rebekah sent Jacob away to go live with her relatives in the land that she had come from in Mesopotamia. Sent him to live with Laban, her family members, to protect him from his brother Esau. Look at verse 43. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice, rise, flee, not just go, flee thou to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and tarry with him a few days until thy brother's fury turn away, until thy brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forget what thou hast done to him. Well, it would not be a few days. He would labor there for 14 years to get the wife that he wanted, and then another 7 years working in the house of Laban. So he was there for at least 21 years. And then subsequent to that time, there will be the meeting between he and his brother, where Jacob just knows that Esau is coming to kill him. But thank God that Jacob has a visitation from God, and that visitation from God changes his name from Jacob to Israel, making him a prince with God and a prince with men. Well, we got to stop there. And so we will stop there. We will pick up with the life of Jacob and then into the life of Joseph and finish out the book of Genesis on next week. And we will cover the book of Exodus on next week. It's a lot there, but we can cover it all by just touching upon the various things that are there in those 40 chapters.